Is there one rule above all others which is indispensable to a director who wants to frighten an audience?
I think he should understand the psychology of audiences. He should also know that audiences love to enjoy the very thing that they have built in, and that's fear.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Hello, and welcome to The Psychologist is In.
What can I do, Foster?
Mix. Mix, Finn, mix.
Be silent!
As we are evaluating the 1960 black and white classic Psycho. You can find this troubling case on Peacock. The movie is directed by Alfred Hitchcock. He himself has some psychological issues that you got to see played out in his movies. So what does our character deal with? Dissociative identity disorder. This movie stars Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates, Vera Miles as Lila Crane, John Gavin as Sam Loomis, Martin Balsam as P.I. Arbogast, and the great Janet Leigh as Marion Crane. Therapy notes. Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. Psycho was censored and banned for its depiction of sex and violence. If they saw what we see now compared to this, but this was in the 1960s, so the movie itself was pretty controversial. What is this case about? Well, first, this was the first horror movie to kill off a major star in its first act. Many have followed this, including one of our favorites, Scream. Marion steals money from her employer and sets off on the run. As she's driving through the desert, she comes across a sheriff who tells her she should pull over at a hotel. Well, for her poor sake, she ended up at the Bates Motel. Marion meets Norman, who runs the hotel with his mother, Norma. If you have not seen this movie, I highly recommend it. This is horror classic noir. The performances and cinematography cannot be outdone now. Therapy note, Gus Van Sant failed miserably at making a shot-for-shot remake of this movie. While Marion is waiting, she overhears Norman and Norma argue. Later on, when they're eating, she tries to have a conversation with him and asks him a couple of questions. She's trying to let him know that his mother is hurting him and he should not live this way. Norman excuses his behavior that mother does. During this discussion, you get a foreshadowing as Norman says, "Mother goes mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes." As with my other cases in the past, I try not to say too much. However, for this one, I'm breaking that rule. And if you did not watch this movie, pause it. If you did, Marion dies. I myself gave you a foreshadowing when I said lead actress is killed in the first act. So it's for that segment that I am going to use to evaluate this case. For those of you still here, we will continue with this diagnosis. Norman suffers from dissociative identity disorder, and this created a personality. As it turns out, Norman is the killer. He has created the personality of Mother. And in the movie, he's even created her own voice, so you can hear their conversations, which is what Marion had overheard. During the conversation with Marion, he alluded to a sexual relationship with Norma. He mentions that the mother said a son is a poor substitute for a lover. And Norman also killed his mother and her boyfriend in a fit of jealousy. The verbal, possible physical, and sexual abuse that Norman suffered at the hands of Norma helped him create Mother. And this caused him to kill other women. Yes, he did kill men. However, he killed women who could have probably looked like Norma, sounded like Norma, or as Norma had said, was a whore. For Norman, the Norma personality came out when he was sexually aroused, which is where I think that he was sexually abused by his mother, hence creating this personality, a personality that comes out when he is sexually aroused and causes him to commit murder. This movie is psychological. The horrors are what Norman went through that caused his psyche to splinter, creating the Norma personality, Mother, and making him a killer. Hence, the horror on his part of all the murders that he is committing. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I'm going to recommend you watch this movie. Anthony Perkins delivers an amazing performance. And again, the film itself is classic horror. One of the best is also the ending. Make sure to watch that. The performance and that end was basically iconic. With that, join me for the next episode. I'm going to go down south and do the Babadook. So, for now, my recommendations is to subscribe. Until then, I will see you next time. The Psychologist is out.